The Sunnydale Animal Shelter, located on the edge of town, was a safe haven for animals in need. It wasn't flashy, but it was a place where lost souls found second chances. Inside, the shelter bustled with the usual morning routine, feeding bowls clattering, soft meows, and wagging tails. David Thompson, the shelter manager, arrived early, as always. At 58, with kind eyes and a salt and pepper beard, David had spent most of his life helping animals. Yet he never let the heartbreak wear him down. He loved his work, even when it wasn't easy. Around midday, David was at his desk when a rusty pickup truck pulled into the parking lot. He glanced up and noticed a middle-aged woman stepping out. Her face was tense, her movements hurried. In her arms, she carried a small, trembling puppy wrapped in a blanket. A cat carrier swung by her other side. David walked to greet her at the entrance. "Hi, welcome to Sunnydale. I'm David," he said warmly. The woman hesitated, then spoke softly. "My name is Ellen," she said. "I can't keep them anymore. I've tried, but I just can't." David looked at her with understanding. He had heard this before, but it never got easier. "Let's talk about them," he said gently. She held up the tiny bundle. "This is Maxie," she said, her voice trembling. "He's about 4 months old. And this," she gestured to the carrier, "is Millie. She's 8. David noticed something unusual. Maxie whimpered softly, and from inside the carrier, Millie let out a low, soothing meow, as if to comfort him. "Are they from the same home?" David asked, curious. Ellen nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "They've been through a lot. Millie never leaves Maxie's side." David carefully took the puppy from her arms. Maxie was small for his age, his fur matted, and his body trembling with fear. When David placed him on the table, the puppy let out a heartbreaking cry. Then something surprising happened. Millie pushed open the carrier door and jumped out. Without hesitation, she climbed onto the table and wrapped her paws around Maxie, pulling him close. David stared, stunned. Maxie's cries softened as he buried his face in Millie's fur. "I've seen many things," David murmured, "but never anything like this." Ellen handed him a small envelope. "This is all I have to help. Please take care of them." As she left, David looked down at the pair. "Welcome to Sunnydale," he whispered. "You're safe now." It was just after lunch when David, the shelter manager, noticed an old pickup truck pulling into the Sunnydale Animal Shelter's parking lot. His years of experience told him that every vehicle pulling in came with a story, and sometimes heartbreak. As the truck's door opened, a middle-aged woman stepped out, her face etched with exhaustion and sorrow. In her arms, she carried a tiny trembling puppy wrapped in a faded towel, while her other hand clutched a cat carrier. The air was heavy with her silence as she approached the shelter's entrance. David met her at the door with his warm, practiced smile. "Welcome to Sunnydale Animal Shelter. I'm David, the shelter manager. How can we help you today?" The woman hesitated, her lips trembling as she spoke. I'm Ellen," she said softly, almost as if unsure of her own words. "I need to leave them here. I can't take care of them anymore." David had heard those words before, but they never failed to tug at his heart. He looked at the puppy, whose big, fearful eyes darted around nervously, and then at the carrier, where soft meows were barely audible. "Let's start with their names," David said gently, motioning her inside. "This is Maxie," Ellen said, her voice faltering as she gestured to the puppy. "He's just 4 months old." She placed the carrier down carefully. "And this is Millie. She's 8 years old. They've always been together." David immediately noticed something extraordinary as he carefully opened the carrier. Millie, the elegant white cat, stepped out, not with the typical feline hesitation, but with purpose. She made a beeline for Maxie, who had begun to cry softly, his tiny body trembling. Millie climbed onto the examination table, gently wrapping her paws around the puppy in what could only be described as a protective embrace. Ellen's voice broke the moment. "They're inseparable," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Millie's been like a mother to him." David's heart ached as he watched the bond between the two animals. "Don't worry, we'll take good care of them," he assured Ellen. With trembling hands, Ellen handed him a small envelope. "It's not much, but it should help with their care." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, her sobs barely concealed. David turned back to Maxie and Millie, still huddled together, their connection unbroken. "You're safe now," he whispered to them softly. This was no ordinary case. David could feel it in his gut. There was a story behind these two, one that would take time and care to uncover. For now, though, Maxie and Millie had found a temporary haven in Sunnydale, where their journey of healing would begin. David led Maxie and Millie to their new temporary home, a spacious kennel prepared with soft bedding, a few toys, and fresh food and water. The shelter was bustling with the sounds of barking dogs and meowing cats, but Maxie flinched at every loud noise, his tiny body trembling uncontrollably. Millie, ever watchful, stayed close, her presence providing the only comfort Maxie seemed to trust. David knelt down outside the kennel, his warm voice soothing. "It's okay, little ones. You're safe here now." Millie stared back at him, her piercing green eyes filled with what almost seemed like gratitude, while Maxie burrowed into her fur, seeking refuge. Over the next few days, it became clear to David and the staff that Maxie and Millie were unlike any other pair of animals they'd cared for. Maxie cried almost constantly, soft, heart-wrenching whimpers that tugged at everyone's hearts. He refused to eat unless Millie nudged him toward the bowl, and even then, he only took small bites. Millie rarely left his side, always ready with a comforting nuzzle or protective paw. Most animals in the shelter, even the traumatized ones, slowly began to interact with others or respond to human affection. But Maxie and Millie seemed to exist in a world of their own, oblivious to the other animals and the staff's efforts to connect with them. David spent hours observing them, trying to understand their behavior. He noticed how Millie would position herself as a shield whenever someone approached their kennel, her body language protective yet calm. Maxie, meanwhile, would shrink behind her, his whimpers softening only when Millie wrapped herself around him. "What have you two been through?" David murmured one evening as he sat near their kennel, jotting down notes in his worn notebook. Determined to help them, he tried various techniques to make them more comfortable. He brought in soft music to create a calming environment and spent time sitting quietly near their kennel, letting them get used to his presence. He introduced them to other gentle animals, hoping to spark some interest. Nothing worked. Maxie continued to tremble and cry, while Millie stayed in her role as his unwavering protector. The staff began to grow concerned. "They're eating so little," one of the volunteers pointed out during a meeting, "and Maxie's still not responding to anything we try. What if—" She trailed off, her worried expression saying it all. David shook his head. "They've been through something. I can feel it. We just don't know what yet. But we're not giving up on them." Each day, David's connection to the pair deepened. He found himself staying late, sitting by their kennel long after the shelter had closed, speaking softly to them or simply keeping them company. Millie started to relax around him, her sharp watchfulness softening slightly. Maxie, however, remained a bundle of fear. David couldn't shake the feeling that their behavior was rooted in something deeper, something traumatic. He knew that uncovering their story might be the key to helping them heal. For now, all he could do was offer them a safe space, his patience, and his unwavering determination to see them recover. It was late one evening when the shelter's front door swung open, and Ellen stepped inside. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled as she clutched a small, battered VHS tape. David looked up from his desk, immediately sensing the urgency in her demeanor. "I'm sorry to come so late," Ellen said, her voice shaking, "but I found something you need to see." David led her to his office, his heart heavy with concern. Ellen placed the tape on his desk, her eyes welling with tears. "It's about Maxie and Millie," she whispered. "I didn't want to burden you with this before, but I think it's important you know." David hesitated for a moment before retrieving the old VCR from the corner of his office. As the tape whirred to life, grainy footage filled the screen, and David's heart sank. The video showed a dimly lit room, its walls barren and cold. Maxie, much smaller than he was now, cowered in a corner, his golden fur dirty and patchy. A man's voice could be heard laughing cruelly off camera. Without warning, the man stepped into the frame, holding a pot of steaming water. David's breath caught in his throat as he watched the man pour the boiling water over Maxie's tiny body. The puppy's cries were faint, almost as if he had learned that loud wails would bring more pain. The camera shifted to show Millie, confined to a small, filthy cage in the corner of the room. Her once pristine white fur was matted and stained, her body thin and frail. The man taunted her with food, dangling it just out of reach before throwing it to the floor, far from her grasp. Then with a stick in hand, he began to strike her, focusing on her hind leg. David couldn't watch any longer. He turned off the TV, his hands trembling and his eyes filled with tears. Ellen was sobbing quietly beside him. "Where did you find this?" David asked, his voice hoarse. Ellen took a deep, shaky breath. "I'm a social worker. I was assigned to check on a family after reports of domestic violence. When I got to the house, it was abandoned. They'd fled, leaving Maxie and Millie behind, huddled together in a closet. I found this tape with them." David sat back in his chair, his mind racing. The trauma Maxie and Millie had endured was unimaginable, yet it explained everything. Their fear, Maxie's constant crying, Millie's protective instincts. "You did the right thing by bringing them here," David said softly. "Now that we know, we can help them heal." Ellen nodded, wiping her tears. "I wish I could do more for them, but my landlord doesn't allow pets. I had to make sure they were safe." After Ellen left, David sat in his office for a long time, processing what he had seen. The cruelty inflicted on Maxie and Millie was beyond comprehension, but it strengthened his resolve. The next morning, David called a staff meeting. He shared what he had learned, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "They've been through so much," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "But they're here now, and we're going to do everything we can to help them heal." With a renewed sense of purpose, the team set to work, determined to give Maxie and Millie the love and care they so desperately needed. The shelter buzzed with a renewed energy as David and his team began the delicate process of helping Maxie and Millie heal. It wasn't going to be easy. The scars of their past ran deep, both physically and emotionally, but David was determined to see them through. Their first step was creating a safe and quiet space for the pair, away from the bustling main kennel area. A small, cozy room was prepared with soft lighting, calming music, and plenty of blankets and toys. The team even set up a small shelf by the window for Millie to perch on, while Maxie's bed was placed right beside it, ensuring they could stay close. Despite these efforts, the first few days were tough. Maxie continued to cry, his little body trembling at the slightest noise. Millie, ever the protector, stayed by his side, nuzzling him whenever he whimpered. They barely ate, and neither showed interest in the toys or treats the staff brought. David spent hours with them each day, sitting quietly in their room with a book or simply speaking to them in soothing tones. He avoided sudden movements, letting them come to him on their own terms. Slowly, they began to adjust to his presence. Millie was the first to approach, cautiously brushing against his leg before retreating. Maxie took longer, but one day he sniffed David's hand and gave it a hesitant lick. Encouraged by these small victories, David consulted with a veterinary behaviorist to develop a tailored care plan. The program included gentle handling techniques, positive reinforcement, and a gradual introduction to other animals and people. It was a painstaking process, but David and his team were patient. Over the weeks, progress came in tiny but meaningful steps. Maxie's crying began to subside, replaced by quiet whines that gradually lessened with time. He started showing interest in his surroundings, sniffing at toys and even nibbling on a treat now and then. Millie, too, began to relax. She allowed herself brief moments of play, batting at a ball of yarn or stretching out in a sunbeam. One afternoon, David witnessed a breakthrough. Maxie tentatively picked up a squeaky toy and began chewing on it, his tail wagging ever so slightly. Millie, watching from her perch, let out a soft purr, as if encouraging him. David's heart swelled with pride. The staff celebrated every milestone, no matter how small. The first time Maxie wagged his tail, the first time Millie rubbed against one of the volunteers, each moment was a testament to their resilience and the power of love. As Maxie and Millie grew more comfortable, David began thinking about their future. Most animals at Sunnydale were eventually put up for adoption, but he knew this pair would need a special home. They couldn't be separated. Their bond was too strong, and their new family would need to understand their past and continue their journey of healing. Months passed, and Maxie and Millie transformed before everyone's eyes. Maxie's once trembling frame grew sturdier, and his big brown eyes began to sparkle with curiosity. Millie, ever graceful, found joy in simple pleasures, like a warm sunbeam or a gentle scratch behind the ears. For David and his team, their recovery was more than just a success. It was a reminder of the power of compassion and the strength of the human-animal bond. Maxie and Millie had come so far, and while their journey wasn't over, their future finally seemed bright. Months of care and love had brought Maxie and Millie a long way from the terrified and broken animals they had been when they first arrived. But David knew their story wasn't complete. They needed a forever home, one that would embrace their unique bond and offer them the patience they still needed. Finding the right family, however, was easier said than done. Many people showed interest in adopting them, drawn to the heartwarming tale of the cat and puppy who had saved each other. But David remained cautious. He turned down applicants who didn't fully grasp the commitment required or who didn't understand the scars, both visible and invisible, that Maxie and Millie carried. Then, one sunny Saturday afternoon, a retired couple named Tom and Sarah Miller walked into the shelter. In their early 60s, they exuded warmth and gentleness, asking thoughtful questions about the animals as David gave them a tour. When they reached Maxie and Millie's room, David paused before opening the door. "These two are very special," he said softly. "They've been through a lot, and they need a home where they can continue to heal." Tom and Sarah nodded, their expressions serious yet kind. As they stepped inside, Maxie and Millie glanced up, their bond evident as always. Maxie was nestled against Millie's side, his golden fur blending with her snowy white coat. David recounted their story, carefully leaving out the most traumatic details but emphasizing their unbreakable connection and the progress they had made. As he spoke, Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and Tom's jaw tightened with emotion. "They've been through so much," Sarah whispered, reaching for her husband's hand. "But look at them now. They're so brave." Tom nodded. "If love and patience can help them heal, we'd be honored to give them that." David felt a flicker of hope. "Why don't you spend some time with them? No pressure, just let them come to you." Tom and Sarah sat quietly in the room, not pushing for interaction. Slowly but surely, Maxie approached Tom, sniffing his outstretched hand before giving it a tentative lick. Millie, ever watchful, observed from her perch but didn't seem anxious, a sign of trust that David didn't take lightly. After an hour, Tom and Sarah left the room, their eyes filled with determination. "We'd like to adopt them," Sarah said softly. "We understand it won't be easy, but we're ready to give them the love they deserve." David's heart swelled. "I think they'd be very lucky to have you." Over the next few weeks, Tom and Sarah visited regularly, learning Maxie and Millie's care routines and gaining their trust. By the time adoption day arrived, it was clear that they were the perfect fit. As David loaded their belongings into the Miller's car, he knelt down to say goodbye. Maxie wagged his tail, and Millie brushed against his hand in a rare display of affection. "You'll always have a place in my heart," David whispered. Watching the car drive away, Maxie's face peeking out the window, David felt a mixture of sadness and joy. Maxie and Millie had found their happy ending, and with it, a new chapter of hope and healing began. The day Maxie and Millie left Sunnydale Shelter marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for them, but for everyone who had been part of their journey. David couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness as he watched the Miller's car disappear down the road. But he knew they were heading toward the life they deserved, a life filled with love and security. Tom and Sarah settled Maxie and Millie into their cozy suburban home, with patience and care. The first few days were quiet as the animals cautiously explored their new surroundings. Maxie stuck close to Millie, while Millie kept a watchful eye on her friend. Sarah and Tom sent regular updates to David, which quickly became the highlight of his days. At first, it was small progress. Maxie venturing a little further into the backyard, Millie claiming a sunny windowsill as her favorite spot. Then came the milestones. One photo showed Maxie lying on a soft rug, his head resting on Millie's side. Another showed Millie chasing a beam of light, her once tense posture now relaxed. But it was the video that came a month later that truly moved David. In the video, Maxie was chasing a butterfly in the backyard, his little yips of excitement echoing through the air. Millie sat nearby, her tail swishing lazily as she watched him play. For the first time, Maxie's bark was strong and free, a sound of joy, not fear. "They're settling in beautifully," Sarah wrote in the message accompanying the video. "Maxie is finally finding his confidence, and Millie is learning how to just be a cat again. It's like they're healing each other." David shared the updates with the Sunnydale staff, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Maxie and Millie's story had become a symbol of hope and resilience for everyone at the shelter. Months turned into a year, and Maxie and Millie continued to thrive. They became inseparable companions to Tom and Sarah, bringing warmth and laughter to their home. Their bond remained as strong as ever, a testament to the love that had carried them through their darkest days. For David, their story was a reminder of why he had dedicated his life to helping animals. Maxie and Millie had shown him and the world that even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, healing was possible. All it took was love, patience, and a chance to start again. And so their journey became more than just a story. It became a legacy, inspiring countless others to believe in the power of second chances. Maxie and Millie's story didn't end with their adoption. It blossomed into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Their incredible journey from trauma to triumph inspired Tom and Sarah to take action beyond their own home. After months of watching Maxie and Millie thrive, the Millers came up with an idea that could help other animals like them. One winter evening, they invited David over for dinner. Maxie and Millie greeted him at the door, wagging tails and soft purrs showing just how far they had come. As the meal ended, Tom and Sarah revealed their plan. "We've decided to create a foundation," Sarah began, her eyes bright with excitement. "The Maxie and Millie Foundation." Tom added, "We want to help shelters like Sunnydale provide specialized care for abused and traumatized animals. Rehabilitation programs, staff training, better facilities, whatever it takes to give animals a second chance, just like these two had." David was speechless. He looked at Maxie and Millie curled up on their bed in the corner, their bond unbroken and their spirits healed. "That's incredible," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'd be honored to help." And so, the Maxie and Millie Foundation was born. Its mission was clear: to spread the lessons of love, patience, and resilience that had saved Maxie and Millie. With David as a founding board member, the foundation launched programs in shelters across the country. Sunnydale was the first to implement the foundation's strategies. Quiet recovery rooms, behavioral specialists, and community outreach became the standard. Shelters that had once struggled to rehabilitate traumatized animals now had the resources and support to change lives. Maxie and Millie themselves became the faces of the foundation. Photos and videos of the once frightened puppy and his protective feline companion were shared worldwide, touching hearts and sparking change. News outlets, social media, and animal welfare organizations spread their story, and donations poured in to support the cause. Back at the Millers' home, Maxie and Millie lived in peace and happiness. Their days were filled with simple joys: sunny afternoons in the backyard, cozy evenings by the fireplace, and endless affection from Tom and Sarah. David continued to visit regularly, each time marveling at their transformation. They were no longer just survivors. They were symbols of what was possible when compassion triumphed over cruelty. Years passed, but Maxie and Millie's impact only grew. The foundation expanded internationally, reaching animals in need across the globe. Stories of rescued animals finding love and healing began to echo the journey of Maxie and Millie, proving that their legacy would never fade. For David, their story was a constant reminder of why he had chosen this path. Every frightened animal that entered Sunnydale was met with the same promise he had made to Maxie and Millie: "You're safe now. Your new life begins today." And so, Maxie and Millie's story became more than just a tale of survival. It became a movement, a testament to the power of love, and a beacon of hope for animals and humans alike. Their bond, forged in pain and nurtured by kindness, became a legacy that would last forever. As the Maxie and Millie Foundation grew, its influence began to reshape not just animal shelters, but entire communities. At the heart of this movement was Sunnydale, the shelter where their story began. David, now more inspired than ever, worked tirelessly to ensure Sunnydale became a model of innovation and compassion. The shelter underwent a transformation, with new facilities and specialized recovery programs funded by the foundation. The once basic kennels were replaced with comfortable, enriched spaces designed to reduce stress for the animals. Quiet rooms, calming music, and interactive toys became standard. Each room told a story. Sunnydale wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was a haven. The community's involvement also grew. Inspired by Maxie and Millie's tale, volunteers from all walks of life came to Sunnydale to offer their time and talents. Teachers brought students for educational tours. Local artists painted murals celebrating the bond between humans and animals. And families came to adopt, eager to give animals a second chance. One day, as David walked through the newly renovated shelter, he came across a familiar sight. In one of the recovery rooms, a scared tabby kitten huddled in a corner, trembling just as Maxie had on his first day. David knelt down, speaking softly. "You're safe now," he whispered, his heart swelling with hope. The kitten's eyes softened, and David knew it was the beginning of another journey, just like Maxie and Millie's. The shelter's influence extended far beyond its walls. Local schools introduced programs teaching empathy and kindness toward animals. Sunnydale's new mobile unit traveled to neighboring towns, providing free spay and neuter services, vaccinations, and educational resources. Maxie and Millie, though now content in their forever home, continued to inspire. Tom and Sarah often brought them to community events where children and adults alike would gather to hear their story. Seeing the once traumatized puppy and his steadfast protector in person reminded everyone of the transformative power of love and patience. One memorable evening, Sunnydale hosted its first ever gala to celebrate the success of the Maxie and Millie Foundation. The event drew supporters, volunteers, and animal lovers from across the region. Tom and Sarah were the guests of honor, and Maxie and Millie joined them on stage, their calm and confident demeanor a testament to their incredible journey. David stood beside them, delivering a heartfelt speech. "We started with two animals who had every reason to give up on the world," David said, his voice steady but emotional. "But they didn't. They taught us that love, when nurtured, can heal even the deepest wounds. Maxie and Millie didn't just find their second chance. They gave one to all of us." The room erupted in applause, and as David looked out at the crowd, he saw not just faces, but a movement, a community united by compassion. Sunnydale was no longer just a shelter. It was a beacon of hope, a place where stories began, and where lives, both human and animal, were changed forever. And as David returned to the shelter that night, he looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Maxie and Millie. Your story will never end." As David sat in his office watching a golden sunset bathe the shelter in warm hues, he reflected on the incredible journey of Maxie and Millie. Their story was no longer just about a crying puppy and a protective cat. It had transformed into a beacon of hope that resonated far beyond the walls of Sunnydale Animal Shelter. Updates from Tom and Sarah continued to pour in. Maxie and Millie were thriving, their days now filled with love, safety, and playful moments that seemed unimaginable months ago. A recent photo from Sarah showed Maxie confidently running across a field, his tail wagging, while Millie lounged nearby, basking in the sun. The joy in their eyes was undeniable, a testament to the healing power of compassion. David leaned back in his chair, his heart swelling with pride. Their story had inspired not only Tom and Sarah, but also countless others who had heard of their bond. Donations to the shelter had tripled, allowing the staff to expand their efforts and save more animals in need. People from nearby towns began visiting, hoping to adopt or volunteer, eager to make a difference. One evening, as David prepared to leave, a young girl and her father walked into the shelter carrying a small, trembling kitten they had rescued. The girl looked up at David with wide eyes and said, "I heard about Maxie and Millie. They helped me understand that everyone deserves a second chance." David smiled, kneeling to take the kitten into his hands. "You're right," he said softly. "Everyone deserves a chance to be loved." As the stars began to twinkle overhead, David locked the shelter doors, feeling a deep sense of purpose. Maxie and Millie had shown the world that even the most broken hearts could be mended with love and patience. Their legacy would live on, not just in the foundation named after them, but in every animal who found hope within Sunnydale's walls. And somewhere in a cozy home, Maxie and Millie lay curled up together, oblivious to the impact they had made, content in the knowledge that they were finally truly safe.